Okay, let's get to testnet Saturday.
Citizens.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the stream. Let me get the tweet out here. How's everybody doing? Give everybody half a second to join up here. Kitty cat. See, this is what you miss if you don't join early. You miss your kid moment. You gonna let us work? Okay, so let's figure out what we have to do today. Gonna have to break off the stream in about an hour and 45. Probably pick it back up after the meeting is done. So today will be a two-parter. Figured this would be fun to spec out our to-dos. So we're aiming for testnet Saturday. It gives us 3 days to prepare. Today, tomorrow, and Friday. What do we have on the list? So we need to get the HTTP data endpoints done. We need to... So extreme. What else? We need to create some file an issue about that Hyper-B problem we had. What else? I need to improve a few swarming behaviors. Need to run a couple of test servers of our own, basically to step through make sure that the process works. So we got our work cut out for us. Not terribly hard. Probably we'll start with this, get the HTTP data endpoints going so that you can communicate with other servers that you're not currently on. We'll need to knock this thing out. It's just important that we do that. Pretty small bit. We'll hit this, and then we'll hit these two. And if we have a little extra time, I'm thinking about reworking the front end of CTZN Livestream to use Tailwind CSS. I've been tracking this, the Tailwind folks ever since they created Refactoring UI, which is a really good book on UI patterns. Highly recommend it, and they've been working on this thing for quite some time, and it just strikes me as maybe a good idea for helping scale up the approachability of the code base. As people try to contribute or the team size grows, I can manage the custom CSS myself, but we may just have an easier time if we switch over to this. Probably shouldn't prioritize that though before Saturday, because it's just not critical. So these are our to-dos, and let's order them here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. Yeah. It just strikes me that consistency gets a lot easier whenever you're using these kind of helper classes. They've also got a nice story around like doing dark mode, where you just use the dark prefix on the colors. which I think will be nice. Hey Miguel, welcome to the stream. Let me get some music going for myself. All right, well, let's get started then. So the Citizen server still has its views. I think it would be a good idea to go ahead and remove all that. So let's go ahead and do that. Not terribly hard to bring them back if we need them. Okay. One problem left, which was this right here.
Citizen.
Okay. So let's start with the user profile get. right. I actually want the reverse. Hey Paul, welcome to the stream. There it goes. Odd. Yeah, that's good. Not sure we need anything more at the moment. I guess one question we'll need to ask is whether or not we want to introduce any secondary indexes into the JSON responses, which we might want to actually. But we'll have to do that progressively as we go. So that's the profile fetch. We got the avatar fetch. And now we need the database route. And that'll be schema ns, schema name, keep. and then we'll do const table equals public user database dot get table rect.params dot schema ns rect.params dot schema name. And I need to make sure that get table only gets existing tables. That's not how we want to do that, actually. Let's look into how we're using this. Really, we want that to be a create table. We'll do it as a kind of get or create. How do I JS? And then we'll do this like this. Simple as that. Let's give it a shot. Hey. Yeah, so that works. And it's a direct pass through to the database. And yeah, I mean, just interesting question is like whether or not we want whether or not or how we're going to do secondary indexing fetches. Do we want to modify the record responses? Could do that. It's introducing a fair amount of opinion into the HTTP endpoints. And then we'll have to spec them accordingly. Of course, things don't work super well if we don't answer that question. The way that our RPC endpoints work, it does bundle in secondary indexes. Like if I fetch a post, it's going to fetch information about the author. It's going to, I think posts even do, yeah, they get things like votes and comment counts. Now, part of the logic of the HTTP endpoints is that they're supposed to be efficient for the server to host, which I think is actually important that we respect more than simplicity or elegance of the design. Because if, again, the idea is that anything under this namespace can be cached using something like Cloudflare, so that excuse me. Oh, brother, what am I saying? So that they can scale. Because the model we're looking at right now is that if you're looking at data that's not on your own server, you'll be talking to the home server. So that needs to not cost a lot. It needs to not bog down people's home servers. AA Lemonade, welcome back to the stream. I'm also sort of wondering if we ought to put users under something like you, or maybe even user, to help simplify things. Like, yeah, I mean, that probably ought to be what would be wise, because we want the front ends of citizen servers to be customizable. We might even just move the DB from here to here. Let's do that. So basically, all of the kind of fixed endpoints in Citizen's backend are being namespaced, like so. Might even want to put it in mind of a dot. I'm not going to well known it, but debating whether or not I want the dot. DB starts to look kind of funny when you just stare at it a lot. Yeah, screw the dot. And that means we need to update our URL construction to reflect that change. Okay. Cool. Worked as expected. The secondary indexes question. myself some coffee and mull this over. Be right back. Okay, so it seems to me like any kind of bundling together that we do here, like any modification of the records, would have a pretty kind of... Not only does it introduce complexity, because we have to find a way to kind of like spec those behaviors, but like we're trading off efficiency versus genericness. And the genericness directly relates to the what's the word I'm looking for? Extensibility. Because if the servers start to bake in logic around specific schemas, then adding new schemas comes at a pretty significant disadvantage. So I'm sort of inclined to say, hey Jim, welcome back. So yeah, I'm kind of inclined to say that we should pay the cost of additional HTTP round trips to fetch secondary index information. It's going to affect application performance though. We might try speccing an endpoint. No. You know, we could try to spec like batch endpoints. But as soon as we do that, the caching story completely falls apart. Well, let's try keeping things simple at first and just see how bad the performance is. Yeah. So let's... Oh, you died on us, huh? Well, that's not very helpful. That sucks. Crap. What were our to-dos? Can I spell? Shoot. It was what? HTTP endpoints, setup, test nodes, deploys. Why am I doing uppercase? And then it was the okay. It was even better when my cool text editor wasn't bugging out on us. Okay. So, can I pop this out into pinning? Interesting. That's handy. Didn't know they had that. Okay. So if we're gonna do it like I'm just suggesting, we need a way for our HTTP endpoint to access the server. So we need to come up with a identifier for the server itself. We could do like underscore self or just self. Or we could actually use the server's domain name. That might be the simplest choice. What do we allow right now in terms of characters or our validation rules for the schema of a user? Okay, it's extremely constrained right now. Good. We have to only progressively allow new characters, because that's one of those things that can really screw with us if we don't take care. I know it's also complicated because people want to... Yeah, I think self. Underscore self, that's kind of ugly. Maybe something else. Hey, Lars. Let's just use the domain. That's the simplest approach. So now, what all does the public server database have? We want to see the comment index on this post. Host, CTZN.network, comment, IDX, and what are the keys for comment IDX? It looks like the subject URL. Okay. Probably because of that encoding. No. Let's see what it just tried. Might just need a, no? Okay. That's not right. Screwed up our database encoding. Construct entry path. There it is. Oh boy, not baking an opinion is going to be hard for performance. Because the index record, you know, it gives us the URLs of all the comments on it, and that's, you know, nice. But whenever you're using the actual RPC API, it's doing a lot more when it's fetching. It'll then actually look up information about like things like the comments or like the votes. Like if I go to the vote IDX, this just gives us a list of the vote URLs. It's not mega helpful. So again, what I'm balancing here is how opinionated the citizen servers can be about the schemas that they host. Excuse me. And if they are not opinionated, we lose performance. If they are opinionated and they bundle together information from secondary indexes, they'll be much more efficient. Much, much more efficient. But we lose some of the genericness. The servers basically have to be opinionated about their HTTP routes. Which would basically mean that end users have a little bit of a hard time adding new schemas. Because they would fall back always to the generic approach. I guess that's actually... Maybe I could return a namespace. Well, so generic is kind of our default, right? Like we've got it so that it's by default you can do what we're suggesting in the generic approach, which is access the HTTP endpoints for the individual indexes. So, or the individual records, which the indexes are a part of. So then the question is just, do we want to optimize with some opinionation the do we want to optimize some of the common schemas, common indexes? I kind of think we do want to do that. I mean, it's sort of elevating the core schemas, but I don't think that's worth avoiding because it's just not going to perform. Because like what happens in the background, normally is that each of these upvote URLs get reduced down to the individual user IDs. And so you would have to, on the client, map these hyper URLs to user IDs using round trips. It's just, I don't even know if that's feasible in any meaningful way. Not to mention sending all these hyper URLs over the wire is pretty poor for performance. Okay. So we'll need to cook up a way to do this. And the simple ways to do what we were doing, like right now, the way that posts come out when you do post.list with a comment count number and votes look like that. Not only is it super opinionated, but it's also like not giving any indication about the underlying schemas that's pulling from. So that's kind of not great for like how do we specify what the data origin is for that kind of stuff. But the question is, do we need to? Also need to think about how we do lists, which I almost am inclined to add like a custom HTTP method like list, get and list. Of course, you can't do that because then list is totally uncacheable. So it'll have to be something like a get on when you don't have a key. Yeah. Protocols are harder than applications, as it turns out. Okay, I'm gonna grab my coffee. Okay, I think for now, to avoid blowing a bunch of time thinking about this, I'm just going to take the easy route and replicate the exact same behavior that we've already had. And then we'll just have to worry about improving on that in the future. So I'm going to close everything else. That pinning is handy. Okay. So, can't solve everything today, exactly right. So I kind of need to take the logic in some of these and factor them out to be reusable. I could move them all into util. I'm just getting a little... this is kind of meant... No, I mean, in the case of count notifications and fetch notifications. Kind of our workhorse. But I'm okay with that. Okay, so I'm going to start with... Yeah, I'm going to start with get post. Okay, let's see how that performs for us. Okay, didn't seem to. Oh, got that wrong. User ID is not defined. Okay, the user ID, is that stored on the database? I don't think it is. So I need to pass that in as well. Can you get syntax highlighting on variables that are not defined in VS Code? It should actually. Oh, that are not. I don't know. I think if I configured the TypeScript compiler to do a pass, which I know is possible, it would actually be giving me red squigglies on. But I just need to get around to doing that. Okay, post not found. And the kitty wants in. 1 second. That's why. Yes, kitty cat. Okay. Let's go ahead and get the list function in there as well. Y'all can hear the cat, but she is whining about something. Yes, you're whining. Mm-hmm. I don't know what you're whining about. Some question as to whether or not we want to support a whole lot of options on the query parameters, or any at all. I mean, probably should, but you lose cacheability real fast. Yep, that worked. Let's create another post. Cool. Kind of looks like reverse didn't work. There we go. Okay. So that's posts, and we need to do this for what? We need it for, got it on posts, we probably need it on votes. No, actually I don't think we do need it on votes. We definitely need it on comments. Now comments, that's an even more tricky one, because there's a get thread method. That one's just completely de-anchored from anything, really. I guess for that, actually, what we do is we decorate the comment index. That's probably how we would do that. But even then, like, this one is a serious modification. Let's look through all of our methods real quick. So nothing in accounts, because that's all for our BC. We got comments.get, which will be the normal thing that we're doing right now, just adding a getter method like with post. Follows, we got list followers, which would be either a custom function or modifying the index. Same thing with list follows, there's some modifications there. Pretty minor modifications though. So maybe nothing. Nothing on notifications, posts are done. Profile is already modified. So really it's just get thread. I imagine we're going to have other situations where we're kind of inclined to do things like get thread. So then I'm kind of inclined to do a custom endpoint. In fact, it makes me wonder a little bit if any modified endpoint ought to be a custom endpoint, rather than the pass through to the record. That might actually be the right way to do this. That might actually be the right way to do this. So rather than like doing this right here. It might actually need to be custom endpoints. That's probably the right call. Okay. So what are those endpoints gonna look like? It certainly feels complicated enough to qualify for that. We've already got the, the avatar and the kind of profile itself are already modified. They're not pass-throughs, so really the only pass-throughs ought to be the ones directly addressing table stuff. Which kind of makes me think we should perhaps do it like this, where rather than /db on all these, it's /citizen. And then these over here are actually db. And then we do stuff like post and posts. In fact, we might even want to invert this even more so that these are actually /citizen /db /username. Same story here. And then this becomes profile. And this becomes citizen /avatar /username. And this becomes citizen /post /username /key. Okay, so all the pass-throughs are citizen /db /the ID of the database, and then straight through. Thank you, Joshua. Appreciate that. Welcome to the stream. How's that going for you? Well, I hope. Awesome. Well, hopefully we're setting up a good framework for you here. So yeah, this is an interesting way to do it. I appreciate that. I don't know if Beaker is ever going to be the next Firefox, but we got high hopes for Citizen. I think Citizen can do some good stuff for us. Problem with becoming a new browser is it's really hard. Okay. I think this is the right call. And I'm using these, for now, I'm going to be using very baked in URLs for some schema behaviors, which is really elevating the core schemas in a way that I would prefer not to, but I don't really know if I have any choice on this. The performance just really isn't going to fly if we don't bake some opinion into the servers. That is just life. So it just kind of, yeah, that's just life. We may eventually have to come up with some way to globally identify these kind of custom routes, but for now we're not going to. Citizen is what we're working on today, and give me one moment and I'll share the repo URL for you. Alright, check it out. What am I doing? I'm glad you like it. Fingers crossed that it all works. So today we're aiming to do a kind of stream, everybody gets involved, test net run on Saturday. And so we're just trying to finish up a couple of tasks in preparation for that. And all of the development of Citizen has been done via live stream, so if you want to go watch some of the playback, you could see all the way from episode 1 when we're fighting with build tooling, all the way up to now. So I've been giving this some thought. I'm pretty sure I'm going to stick with post as the name of our things. Just keep it generic. What's wrong with that? What refactor would you propose? this is now Citizen DB. Okay, so that's working as before. That's working as before. That's working as before. Okay, that's not working. Profile. Just a function. All right. Cool. So, profile wasn't working just now. Why is that? User ID is not defined. There. Okay, so there's profile. There's avatar. There's posts. Okay, post failed. I've been a developer. I started when I was like 12. So I've had plenty of time. I'm 34 now. Been programming more than I haven't been. So about a year and a half ago. Awesome. Welcome to the fold. Let's take a look at all the API methods we're calling right now. Notifications, the profile get, list followers, list follows, so we'll need follows and followers. Oh yeah, I know. The 100 Rabbits people, they're very cool. Get votes for subject. That's probably only on reload signals, so don't think we need that. Started out in Ruby on Rails was a pain. Yeah, I feel that. Sweet, Lars. Yeah, if anybody wants to participate in the testnet on Saturday by running a server, you want to go ahead and get a VPS set up, get the domain name allocated for it. It'll be fine if you're starting from scratch on Saturday. We'll make a day of it and everything. Okay, so let's get the thread getter done. You dev on Linux? Yeah, I've dev'd on pretty much every environment, and at this stage, Mac has been my favorite. They all have their strengths and weaknesses, but I just have come to really like Mac. It gives you a lot of the affordances that, you know, a nice GUI can give, while also still being a Linux. Yeah, Windows is tough. I don't enjoy it. I wanted to like Windows a lot, and I just don't. Like, I was super excited about some of the stuff they'd been doing in the past 5 years or so. Was so ready to be into it, and it's just not that good. Anything special the server will need other than a node and a domain? No. Currently HTTPS is not forced. In fact, I'll probably, for the testnet, make sure that HTTP domains are working okay. That will not be the case in the long run. Eventually you're going to need to set up HTTPS. Yeah, version 14 should be good. Bueno. Es bueno. Still debating whether or not I want to normalize. I think maybe it would be a good idea to normalize posts and comments into the same schema type. Still debating that. We'll decide after the testnet. Functionally, they're already pretty much the same. They both have the same character limit. And one of the things that I actually do enjoy about Twitter is when somebody replies, it shows up on the feed. It's a great way to discover conversations. Okay. Get thread there. So now over here. Okay, so that's a post. There's the URL of the post. So now we're going to do thread and present to F, present to F, present to F, present to F, present to F. Did I get the wrong? That's the key. There we go. Fail to decode parameter. Be that way. Okay. What is wrong? Ah, parse entry URL is not defined. Fetch user ID is not defined. Public user DBs is not defined. So many problems, so little time. What else? Can't set property URL null, that's a new one. Line 47. Yeah, that's what's wrong. I screwed this up. There we go. But that's not all of the content. Huh. I've broken some things. What did I break? Broke that. thread is not defined. And thread getters.js. Okay, so that's fixed now, and that's fixed now. Okay. So, I've got about 15 minutes before I need to head out for the DAD consortium call, and then we'll maybe an hour and a half after that, so in 2 to 2.5 hours we'll pick back up on the stream. So a couple things need to be updated here. Need to sort of fix up the URLs that are being passed back to citizenry so that the avatar and things like that are working correctly. So that's a step one. And then we need to update the citizenry to use the HTTP endpoints whenever you're logged out. Or whenever you're talking to a server that's other than your current one. And then that should be everything for our HTTP endpoint push. So then we can fix up the swarming behaviors and file that Hyper-V bug. Then I'm actually going to test multiple nodes locally. Put that right there. Then we need to add some kind of a sign-up UI, something simple for, you know, when we're running the test net. And I imagine we can get, well, depending on how much, we can either get to here. Yeah, that'd be a good target. Let's see if we can get all the way there by the end of the day. So we got 15 more minutes-ish. Let's go ahead and get started on having the citizenry get the code going for it to be kind of choosing the correct endpoint. And that's going to require something like its own getters, I think. Yeah, and we'll have this just mirror. So we'll have a get profile, get user posts, get post. No, IPv6 is not necessary. So at the session, let's modify isActive to take in a domain, optionally. And if the info dot domain does not equal that domain, so that gives us the ability to do this. If session dot is active the same pattern for all of these. Get thread, we may just always use the HTTP endpoint for convenience. But we actually need to know we need to know the author ID. Okay. Interesting. That's a tricky bit. We don't always know. Sometimes our URLs are going to be... that sucks. Sometimes we're getting content by the hyper URL, and we don't know what the user ID is. Oof. Dadgum. I guess we can web finger it. No, we can't web finger it. Wow, that's an interesting problem. Huh. That may alter our entire approach, now that I think about it. Because the problem we have here is, if we have a hyper URL and no ability to, like if we have a hyper URL and we don't know what the user ID is of the author, then we have no way to map that hyper URL to the home server without asking our server to do some work on the hyper network, because the client doesn't have access to the hyper network. One way we could potentially get around that, I mean, we could just create an endpoint for your home server to do that lookup, but if you're logged out from a home server, you're not going to be able to do that. Unless every server's got an open endpoint for resolving that mapping. Which I don't like the sound of. Interesting. But we may still need to do that. Now, the reason I was thinking, that might alter our entire approach is the way that we've designed this is that your home server is only syncing data that the home server is responsible for. And so when you want to talk or read the content of somebody that's on another server, you actually talk to their home server by HTTP GET, which is why I've been kind of emphasizing the cacheability of the HTTP endpoints, so that when non-member users are trying to fetch data, it's not going to bog down the server. But there was another way we could have done this, which is to have the home server actually always be the kind of gateway to content, so that you're only ever talking to your home server. That only works if everybody's logged in, though. So I don't really love that approach. Plus, I mean, you're talking about your home server having to basically proxy all traffic on behalf of the end user, which is not really a great approach. So I think we're going to need to have a generic endpoint for doing resolution. Yeah, we're going to have to think about that. What sucks about having a generic kind of open endpoint like that, I guess the user IDs are specific to the home server context, or are they universal? User IDs are universal. Let me map out precisely what the problem is that we're dealing with here so y'all can... So, save this guy. So we'll have, there's two different kinds of identifiers. There's the hyper URLs, and then there's the user IDs. Gotta change this font. Thank God. And the okay, so those are our two kinds of URLs being used. Whenever we're referencing users as much as possible, we're going to use their DNS ID. But inside of data, it'll be like, say this is a comment, it would be it'll look like that. And so the thing I just came up against is this precise situation where you're looking at a comment, you have a subject URL, and you need to somehow go from a hyper URL to the DNS ID so that you can then get the domain, and then you can get to the get. So that suggests we need some kind of endpoint that's like CTZN lookup user. Suggest we need something like that. So the first of all, we're using Hyper-Bs. Grammar good. We're using Hyper-Bs, so you know that. But it's not exactly hard. The problem is that this endpoint here, for it to work, it's going to first need to look into its local cache, and it's basically going to need to look up the Hyper-B off the network, and then it will load up a metadata record on it, which will indicate the DNS ID, and then it'll have to talk to the DNS to the server to confirm that that's the correct current mapping, which is just basically like I wouldn't mind that if it was only for logged in users. Even then, it's still a little bit of an overhead. But the problem is that we need to be able to do this even if you're logged out. So that's an interesting problem. We could include in any record information about the DNS ID of the subject. Of course, if they ever rehome, that will fall out of date. But that may actually be preferable to this. This might be just too much. This is one of those things that you really don't want to run into right before you're trying to do something like the testnet, because this is going to require a little bit more work than I had plotted out. But so this is that's option 1, and option 2 very creepy city alarm just went off. Well, with the very creepy alarm blaring. Okay, it's stopping. I'm guessing they're just testing something. Yeesh, that's always so creepy. I'm kind of actually leaning towards option 2. I mean, it is a little bit interesting to capture what the DNS ID is at the moment of the post. Could also just store the author ID or the hyper URL and the HTTP URL. So just have both there. That might actually be a better way to do it. Okay, well, I'm out of time, so we're gonna take a break for like 2.5 hours, and then we'll come back and tackle the rest of this. So I'll see y'all later today. Enjoy your lunch or whatever the heck it is you're doing at your current time zone. See y'all in a bit.
Citizen.